So although it's quite small, I'm going to be kind of talking to the world, I hope. And then, so I'm going to talk for about 20 minutes about fathers in the workplace. And then there'll be as much or as little time for questions as you want, because we're the last session, there's nothing after us. We stay here till midnight if we like, or we can go in about 22 minutes from now, okay? So, okay, everybody, well, thank you. My name's Sarah Jackson. I'm the Chief Executive of Working Families. We're the Work-Life Balance charity. And we've been at the forefront of changing the way we live and work for nearly 40 years. I think I need to do that as well, don't I? Yes, I do. We want work to work for people, for families and the economy, so that families thrive and business prospers. We provide free legal advice to parents and carers on their rights at work, and we provide specialist employment advice and support to parents of disabled children. We also work in partnership with you, with employers on your people strategies to make our vision of family-friendly workplaces a reality. And we conduct groundbreaking research to support our campaigns for change. So what I'm going to do this afternoon is talk about three things. First, I'll do a run-through of what our research tells us about what working families need, then an overview of why employers should seek to meet those needs, and finally some practical steps that you can be taking now to support the fathers in your workplace. So now every year we run the Modern Families Index. Now this is the most comprehensive survey of working parents in the UK. It's a snapshot of lives of working families across the UK. 2,750 working parents responded last year, each with at least one dependent child under the age of 13 who's either living with them all or some of the time. And the sample gathered equal numbers of mothers and fathers across the age ranges. And respondents represented a range of household incomes and family structures. The majority, more than 3/4, identified as being from couple households, and in just under half of those couple households, both parents were working full-time. So what we've seen is a retreat from the male sole breadwinner household, and that's common across the UK. Care is much more likely to be shared now. And the most common household income amongst the parents we surveyed was between £40,000 and £60,000 for a couple household, and around, well, below £40,000 for single-parent households. So what we're talking about is everyday families. And the index asks parents what their family and work balance is like, whether or not the balance matches their aspirations, and what the effects of being a parent and working are on family life. So what did we find? Well, we found that families in the UK in 2017 are under pressure. Only 1 in 5 families say that they've got the right balance between the time they need to spend with the family and the money, earning or having enough income, that they need to see their family thrive. Now, often this is a zero-sum game, money or time plays off. But for more than 1/3 of families, they're saying they haven't got enough time or money. So it's very clear that family life is under pressure from the demands of work. Now, more than 7 out of 10 parents say they catch up on work at home in the evenings at weekends. 1 in 5 fathers told us they do this all the time. And unsurprisingly, this erodes family life. Half of parents said that work got in the way of spending time with their children. 1/3 said it had a negative effect on their relationship. Half of parents told us that their work-life balance is increasingly a source of stress, and this situation is unsustainable. Just under half of parents think that over the last 2 years it's become financially more difficult to raise a family, and this is reflected in the fact that many families, as I mentioned, have got 2 full-time earners. Essentially, it seems that families may not be able to get by on less than 2 full-time wages. Now, particularly for this session, we're concerned that our findings have uncovered the risk of creating a fatherhood penalty in the UK. If you go back to the mid-80s, close to half of the public agreed with the statement, a man's job is to earn money, a woman's job is to look after the home and family. 30 years later, only 13% subscribe to this view. I may be showing my age, actually. 40 years later, isn't it, from the mid-80s to now? That's terrifying. Is it 30? Do you promise me? 80s, 90s? Yeah, good, okay, I'm not that old. So since the mid-80s, we've dropped from close to half to 13%. So there's been a real shift in what people think about gender roles at home and at work. And in our research, nearly 2/3 of fathers cited family as their highest priority. Fathers are taking an active part today in childcare. A quarter of fathers drop their children at school or at nursery every day. Nearly a fifth of them are collecting the child every day. So it feels like we might be at a kind of tipping point in terms of shared care and shared careers. And because fathers are increasingly actively involved in childcare, they will make career sacrifices accordingly. So 7 out of 10 fathers said that they would consider their childcare arrangements before they took a new job or a promotion. And that compares with 8 out of 10 mothers. So the gap is closing there in terms of what mothers and fathers do. And almost half of fathers indicated that they would downshift into less demanding roles to get a better work-life balance. And I think this is where the risk of a fatherhood penalty becomes apparent. It's where men's careers are deliberately stalled or put on hold as they try to find or keep roles that they can combine with family life. So we saw that 4 out of 10 fathers would be willing to take a pay cut to achieve a better work-life balance, reflecting the difficulty they're facing in reconciling work and home life. And a third say we feel burnt out regularly. So it almost seems as though men and women are feeling now that they have to downgrade their career in order to care for their children, which to me seems a rather perverse kind of equality. So if we turn to flexible working, it's been 3 years since the right to request flexible working was extended to all employees with 26 weeks of service. So all should be well in the flexible working garden, shouldn't it? Well, on paper, 62%, so almost 2/3 of fathers say that they work flexibly, but actually the truth is a much more complicated picture. There's a mismatch between modern families and current workplace culture. Typically, still, staying late is seen as commitment to the role, and so those who can stay late are the people who are winning the promotions and the projects that bring status. It's very difficult for those who've got caring responsibilities or who have changed their working patterns, and these are still usually the women, and so this reinforces the gender divide at work. Nevertheless, when we talk to fathers, more than 1 in 10 fathers is concerned that their workplace culture means those who are working flexibly are less committed, and 10% of fathers believe that working flexibly will have a negative impact on their career. Nearly a fifth of fathers feel either that their employer is unsympathetic about their childcare responsibilities, or they would never tell their employer at all that they had childcare problems for fear of being viewed negatively. And a whopping 44%, so nearly half of all fathers, have lied or bent the truth to their employer about family-related responsibilities which might get in the way of work. Interestingly, 61%, so many numbers, but 61% of parents generally said they would feel confident asking their employer about missing work for a family occasion, but only half said they would feel confident about a permanent change or a major change, about reducing hours or placing boundaries around work calls or emails. So in other words, half of parents are not comfortable raising the issue of workload and hours, both of which are clearly issues for many of them, but that they're hiding that from their employer. So this translates badly for engagement, and it's worse for fathers than it is for mothers. 39% of fathers, many of whom are working flexibly, feel resentful towards their employer about their work-life balance, compared to only 30% of mothers. So that's about 4 in 10 fathers versus 3 in 10 mothers feel a resentment. And more than a third of parents who work flexibly, I think this is really crucial, more than a third of parents who are working flexibly nevertheless feel resentful about their work-life balance. So it's clear that the right to request is not a cure-all or a panacea, especially not if it simply means flexibility to work long hours in a time or a location of your choosing, but actually the workload is still impossible. And it also doesn't fit the bill if it's a right that people are too frightened to use. Now, we did some research a few years ago which said very clearly, let's not write off flexible working, because when it does work, it is absolutely invaluable. We did this work with Cranfield University. It was an extended piece of research carried out within 7 large organisations across 2 years. And what we found was a positive relationship between flexible working and individual performance. So the majority of flexible workers, their co-workers and their managers reported that there was either a positive impact or no impact at all on individual performance. And this was true both of the quantity of work and the quality of work that the flexible worker was producing. And flexible working was seen as a positive factor in achieving a better work-life balance. And the majority of employees reported that flexible working had a positive effect in reducing and managing stress levels. Flexible workers were found to have higher levels of organisational commitment, and in some cases they also had higher levels of job satisfaction. And in addition, the availability of flexible working was a key competitive strategy within the labour market. So all good, and flexible working was seen as an appropriate method of working and culturally acceptable when it was available to all employees, regardless of their personal circumstances. What we did find was greater cultural resistance, where the actual take-up was dominated by certain types of employees, typically mothers of young children. So that's when you started seeing flexible working not being properly embedded, but it was seen as an accommodation for people with care responsibilities. We also took a look at relationships and flexibility. So we did this work with the relationships research charity 1+1, because we wanted to increase our understanding about how the stresses at work and at home are caused, and also how they cross over and impact onto one another. And what we discovered was that there's a positive connection between work engagement and relationship quality. So I'm talking here about the couple relationship at home of your staff members. And what the findings showed us is that work-life balance is not the bringing together of 2 separate and competing domains. We're actually talking about 2 things that need to be understood really as 2 aspects of the same dynamic. And further, it appears that home life can be a real driver of motivation and performance at work, and work life can have a real impact on personal relationships. So broadly, what that means is that bad work goes home, and it can damage personal relationships, and that then comes back into work in the shape of poor performance. And equally, good work, of which flexible working we showed was an essential element, good working can reverse that pattern and can support relationships at home. And then finally, nice, good, strong home relationships can help your staff member have the resilience to ride out temporary challenges at work. So flexible working is a really valuable tool to deliver high performance. But what the Modern Families Index brings us back to is that it's not enough just in itself. So the question really is what can employers be doing about this here and now? So I've got 3 suggestions. Firstly, let's improve your father policy. So look at paternity leave. Is it paid? At what level? Who's taking it? How long do they take it for? Could you, for example, make it a benefit for all your fathers from day one in the job? Can you offer them some flexibility around when the leave can be taken? And remember, we're only talking about 2 weeks here, so the more flexibility you can give to your fathers, the better. There's an additional benefit there, that it means that your fathers are more likely to come forward and say that they are taking paternity leave rather than just quietly taking a bit of annual leave so you don't even know who they are. Then what about shared parental leave? Is that enhanced? If you enhance maternity leave and pay, are you matching that in your shared parental leave offering? And can you give maximum flexibility as to when fathers take it, so that you can enable as many families as possible to make use of the scheme? Because many organisations tie the period of shared parental leave to the date of birth of the child, which makes it's easier for you to plan and manage it that way. But if you think about it, for most families, if you're offering pay as part of your shared parental leave package, when the mother gets to the unpaid part of her maternity leave, that's when she may well choose to go back to work. So she's actually got 13 weeks that can be available for your paid father to take at some point in those first 9 to 12 months, but only if you've left it floating so that he has the choice. And finally, the question is, what coaching, if any, and mentoring do you provide to fathers in your workforce? Because remember, fathers think that you don't care, they feel invisible, they assume that their manager is not interested in their fathering responsibilities. So there's a lot you can do in terms of coaching, mentoring, supporting fathers who've taken some leave, even if it is only for a couple of weeks. Step 2 is about role models. I would say go overboard on promoting father role models who work flexibly and who've taken extended leave. If you've got senior fathers, so much the better, but male role models generally. And maybe you've got some fathers, or rather some non-carers, so you have men who want flexibility for other reasons. You know, maybe they're doing something sporting, maybe they're training, maybe they're studying, maybe they're doing scouts, or they're a magistrate. The key is to highlight all of that flexible working that's going on by men, so that you're trying to create a culture that normalizes men working flexibly and normalizes men caring, and just use as many communication channels as you possibly can to get the word out. And then thirdly, train and support your line managers. Because remember, you've got to challenge those assumptions that men don't care in the sense that they are not the carers, and that men don't want to work flexibly. Because that's what's feeding the resentment that we see in the Modern Families Index. So train your managers in how to handle a flexible working request, train them how to manage people working flexibly, and train them to ensure that flexibility really is on offer to everybody. That flexible working offering needs to be proactive, it needs to be strongly messaged, and it needs to be targeted at men. And then finally, a fourth and final call. What we really need to do is change our recruitment or recruiting culture. So this is Happy to Talk Flexible Working. This is a strapline and a logo that was developed by a private sector working group, which I chaired for the DWP, because we were looking at how to find non-legislative ways of getting the message out to get around the 26-week rule, which stops people formally asking for flexible working, and to tackle the fact that when people are looking for a job, they can't see what's available flexibly. So if you can use the Happy to Talk Flexible Working strapline, it's a way of challenging your managers to identify the flexibility that is inherent in almost every role in your organisation. So you move to the point where flexibility is the norm and not the exception. And you're moving to the point so that where people who are wanting to work for your organisation can see precisely what flexibility is available for in the exact role when they're applying. So you take away the fear of asking at the point of interview, and you take away the manager being on the back foot when somebody that they really like says, I really want to work 4 days a week. They've already thought it through. The ad should already say, this job is suitable for people working 3 to 4 days a week, or suitable for job share, or can be worked from home, or has fixed hours that have to be office-based, but, you know. So, and it is a challenge because it's a huge culture change, because it's moving the thinking much further back down the line. But it's a real attractor. And Lloyd's Banking Group have done a very interesting piece of candidate research. They surveyed 6,000 candidates about what they were looking for in a job ad. And what the candidates said, it's all very well and good having some overarching statement about being family friendly or flexible on your recruitment website. But actually what we want to know is the detail role by role. We want to know what fits our circumstances. So I really do commend Happy to Talk Flexible Working to you. You can pick it up off the Working Families website. It's free to use. There's no copyright or licensing or anything. Just get on and use it. And if you want some help with that, we can give you some advice. But really what you're trying to do is move this away so that flexibility becomes the norm. It's not the exception. It's not about doing anybody a favour. It's been well thought through. Because, you know, really the question has to be, why is flexibility seen as the aberration? We've got to turn the whole thing on its head. And our employer members have seen the benefits that come from going with the grain of employees' lives in terms of loyalty and motivation. Parents in the Modern Families Index were very clear that they would leave employers who are not offering good work-life balance opportunities. And yet, going back to the fathers, government figures from 2014 showed that fathers are twice as likely as mothers to have their flexible working request turned down. But of course, as I've said, flexibility is not an end in itself. What we need is those sensibly designed human-sized jobs that fit the work hours that have been allocated to them. And flexibility from the outset can help with this, rather than you end up making post hoc changes after appointment. So, to close, really just to say, if you are inspired to make some changes, Working Families is here to help. We've been working with employers for almost 40 years. We offer benchmarking, training, consultancy, and all the tools that you need to create an agile and family-friendly workplace that supports mothers and, of course, crucially, fathers. So that is my overview, and I'll be very happy to, does this go back to, I think somebody else takes over that. Very happy to take questions or start a conversation going. I think I have to ask you to speak into the mic because of the watching millions.
Okay, thanks. Can you tell us a bit more about the Lloyd's research you mentioned? I didn't quite understand your point about they wanted it on individual jobs.
What they did was they spoke to 6,000 people who were coming to their website looking for work, to ask them whether it was an attractor to know that Lloyd's Banking Group is a flexible, or as they always talk about agility. You know, we're an agile employer. Is that good? And what the candidates said was, yes, it's fine, but what we really want to do is we want to be able to pick the job by the form of flexibility that's on offer. So we want to know before we even start digging through, because mostly, even employers who are thinking this through and thinking about the flexibility on offer, you've generally got to go into the job description to find out what's there. And so if you are wading through somebody's website, it's quite hard work and it's time consuming. So if you can use a logo, which immediately indicates to the candidate that you've thought about it, then they can see, and then put up at the top, you know, at the top of your advert, this is suitable for, you know, remote working, or whatever the form of flexibility is that you've identified. And that way all the expectations are managed from the off as well. So you don't get somebody who's fantastic, but who's only available to you on a job share basis, because you've already said this has to be done in whatever pattern it is. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. There's one behind you there.
Jana Jabernik. That's a really good point, I think, around flexibility as well, and how employers recruit. What we found out in research is that people feel very reluctant in asking for flexibility. And this is happening more and more, and men in particular feel very reluctant asking for these provisions. So I think if an employer is really eager to recruit the best candidates, then I think this is a top tip. Yeah. Just advertise it explicitly.
Because it's a frequent question that we get on our helpline. People are ringing up and saying, do I dare ask? And it's one of the things that is trapping people in jobs below their skill level. So the figures suggest that there's about 1.5 million people in the UK who are just trapped because they've got the flexibility they want and therefore they can't move on. And you'll also know that most people can access flexible working within their existing employer, but they can't move. So which can be great for you. It means that you've got somebody with good skills and there they are and they're not going anywhere. But actually, it's not so great if they end up feeling that they're stuck and they've been in that role for too long and they can't work out how to move up through your organisation. And so they may well bounce sideways or even down to retain the flexibility, but to get out.
Hello. We find that while some people feel comfortable speaking in the recruitment process with the recruiter about flexible working, and that they might like to actually have flexible working opportunities, the recruiter sometimes advises actually that when they first meet with their hiring manager, they don't broach that just yet. And then it's quite difficult for them to almost reverse and bring it up later, which probably is something that we should change. And from a recruiting side, they should maybe be speaking earlier with hiring managers. Yeah. But what advice would you give to the recruiters to try and motivate that conversation?
I would like to see recruitment agencies putting that, on the immediate checklist, so that they're prompting the organisation to think about it, because it doesn't often happen now. You're right. The recruiter just gets on and is trying to do what they always do because they're working fast and they want to make their money and move on. Sorry if there are any recruiters in the audience right now. You? No. But one of the things I would like to see is it becoming part and parcel of the recruitment agency. And actually REC were part of the group that devised the logo and strapline, because they recognised that the recruiter's in a position of being able to prompt the question, have you thought about the flexibility in this role yet? But at the moment, too many recruiters, I think, just think it's easier to get the standard Lego-shaped person, and that's all the employer wants, and leave the issue about what shape of person do you really need to the employer to sort out further down the line. Is that us, do you think? Or any further specific issues or questions that you want to raise before we wrap up? Yes, someone at the back there. Fred.
Hello. This is just a request for further information, really. I was quite interested because I hadn't ever heard that discussed before about the impact of the work environment on home relationships and vice versa. And actually, I think that's quite illuminating and potentially quite important going forward in this whole conversation. So I wondered if you could say any more about that at all.
Well, first of all, you can go to the Working Families website and go to the publications section and dig deep, because it was about 4 years ago we did this piece of work, but you will find the whole research study there. But it was a couple of years worth of work, because we developed a sort of academic hypothesis first of all, and then had to test it both through a quantitative survey and also doing work within employers to talk to fathers and mothers in focus groups to find out what the situation was. But it was absolutely fascinating to see this two-way flow of, I suppose, relationship health, and to see very clearly that you could very easily get a downward spiral as things being too difficult at work, not meaning necessarily a bullying manager or work stress. It just in terms of my difficulty is that my working hours don't fit my family life, and I worry about that. My performance isn't great. I take that worry home, and then I moan to my partner, and my partner moans at me, and I come to work feeling stressed, and down the plug hole we go. But equally, if the organisation was doing interventions, we designed a very simple little intervention where teams would have just 4 or 5 questions, which were things like, how was your weekend? To make sure that they all committed to say to each other every week. That was a way of reversing the plug hole effect, so that you got people feeling more confident about sharing their outside lives, bringing the outside in, if you like, so that they could tackle some of the work systemic issues that were dysfunctional and that were causing stress at home. So that you could very quickly see that where things were going well at work, happy people went home, and home became happier. And the importance of home being happy, though, was then it enabled people to ride out the problems that they were being faced at work, which were just work-related problems. I'm working on a difficult and challenging problem, or we've got a budget crisis that we've got to sort out by the end of the month. That's where you need the resilience that comes from having a good, strong relationship at home. But within that, it was very clear that flexible working was one of the really vital tools that could be used. So it wasn't like flexibility was having the impact on the relationship. It was that flexibility was a way of ensuring that work was not having a negative take-home effect. It was an enabler, exactly. Hello. Where's the...
Where does something like shift working, conflict with flexible working when you do have services that do require things like a shift pattern?
I think shift working can be very difficult, because shift working can be totally inflexible. And I think one of the problems is we haven't really got a fully understood definition of flexible working. So flexible working encompasses part-time working, shift working, 0 hours, short hours, remote working, working from home, all the different kinds. But actually, what we're really talking about is control. So where flexible working brings benefits to your organisation and to the person is where they feel that it gives them some form of a level of control over how and when and where they're working. And for shift workers, obviously, they don't have much control. What they may well have is they've got the control at the start of the process, so they apply for the job and they know that the shifts are going to be a set pattern. Some organisations make it possible for people to flex within their shifts and to swap. McDonald's has a family and friends scheme where you've got an identified small group of workers who are all trained, so the manager knows that whichever one of them turns up, it's fine. So it doesn't have to be shared upstairs. You don't have to ask permission. Just one of your family and friends group can come and take your shift. But I think we've also got an issue about the uncertainty of shift work. So as you probably know, in some industry sectors, particularly things like retail, people are employed on a 15-hour-a-week contract, for example, and they only know on a weekly or fortnightly basis actually how many hours they're going to work. And that really undermines that sense of control and makes a resilient family life quite difficult, because you just don't know how much you're going to earn and you don't know when you're going to need childcare. And so there is some real work for us to do as a society in looking at the quality of work, particularly for lower paid people, so that you can bring security and certainty back into people's work lives. Even if their income isn't great, at least they know what it's going to be and they know when they're going to have time to spend with their families. You know, the flip side being at the top end of the scale, people have just got this overburdening time commitment that they have to fit into their week somehow. And they also feel out of control, even though in theory they should be in control because they can choose the when and the where.
I recently returned from Newfoundland when I was conducting research with fishermen. And it's a similar trend with fishermen in Iceland. Mm-hmm. So they go away for quite a while. So they basically have a perfect work-life balance because one part of the equation is taken out of their calendar. But I do wonder, and I think that may be interesting for the employers or HR representatives here, is how do you manage this accessibility of flexible working across different organizational units? So, for example, if your work is organised in many different ways, obviously some work can be made flexible, done flexible, whereas others can't. So how do you manage the question of fairness across your workforce?
Does anyone have an experience they want to share on that one before I keep talking?
That was kind of the origin. So we are currently conducting our staff survey, and a corporate hub, and a local government employer that has flexible working opportunities. But we know that we've got satellite sites out in the depots where we've got our street scene and our highways guys, again predominantly male, who their work is structured around shift patterns. And I appreciate this is being broadcasted, but I probably am not being pessimistic to think that will be a point of contention when we get the answers back from our survey when that closes in the end of October. Just that, I don't know if there's a way for us to do it yet, but I know there's something that needs to be done.
I mean, I would point to an interesting example, which is BAE naval ships up on the Clyde, who have three very distinct workforces. So they've got the shop floor, the people who are actually making the ships. They've got office people and they've got management. And what they did was they talked to the workforce and they were very clear and very transparent about what flexibility was possible in those different bits of the business, and then worked with the workforce within each bit of the business to design a form of flexibility that worked there, so that you have fairness of approach and you've got fairness of process, and you're also absolutely clear that different kinds of jobs have the potential for different kinds of flexibility. So what they said to the managers is, we don't care where you work, you don't have to be in the office. What they said to the shop floor workers is, we don't care how long you work as long as you finish an agreed amount of work every week, with the result that most shop floor workers finish on a Thursday night and have Friday off. So it can be done, but I think what's really important is that transparency, and just be very, very honest about what can and can't be done, and very clear that the organisation will take has a fair set of principles which you message very clearly, and then you also have a fair process, and then you're very clear that the end result will vary, and it will even vary within the same team, or two people sitting next to each other in the same bit, two of you on the same table could end up having different results from the same request, because by the time one of you has had your flexible working arrangement agreed, then the nature of how your team is covering the work has become different. And so it doesn't mean that because I get Tuesday off, you will get Tuesday off. Are we done? I think we are done now. I think everybody thinks it's 4 o'clock. It's 4:05, in fact. So I think I would like to thank you very much for listening to me. I hope you've picked up some interesting tips. Please do go to the Working Families website, dig around. There's masses of stuff there, loads and loads. We have a case study library called the Wainwright Library, which we just launched last week, which is absolutely chocker full of interesting case studies for you to take a look at. And there are bits of policy and stuff you can download. There's also masses of information for your staff, which is open access, free to use, on their employment rights. And basically, if there's anything that we can do to help, I'm Sarah Jackson. Drop me an email, give me a ring. Thank you very much.